Comfortably numb. How one family drove the opioid crisis in America. Those familiar with the biggest museums in the world will have heard of the Sacklers, one of the wealthiest families in the United States, whose name adorns galleries in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York and the National Gallery in London. Known for their generous donations to prestigious institutions, the Sacklers were not forthcoming about how they made their fortune, however, and it has only recently emerged that they own Purdue Pharma, a pharmaceutical company that manufactured OxyContin, the highly addictive painkiller that has fueled an opioid crisis in America over the past 20 years. Patrick Radden Keefe begins this compelling narrative about a family empire built on secrecy, obfuscation, and corruption with the highly ambitious Arthur Sackler, born to a Jewish family in Brooklyn in 1913. Arthur's father had instilled in him the idea that if he lost a fortune he could always make another one, but that if he lost his good name he could never recover it, and so Arthur trained as a doctor, Ivy League universities being closed to him, due to anti-Semitic quotas, believing that as a medical professional he would earn respect. He worked several jobs while a student to help support his family, and it was as a part-time copywriter for a pharmaceutical company that he realized he also had a knack for sales. Arthur specialized in psychiatry after he graduated. He had a commanding presence and was a huge influence on his younger brothers, Raymond and Mortimer, who, following in his footsteps, became psychiatrists as well. The three brothers worked together at Creedmoor Psychiatric Hospital in New York in the 1940s and 50s, when methods used to treat mental patients included electroshock therapy and lobotomization. The brothers believed that the cause of mental illness was chemical and, conducting experiments on Creedmoor patients, discovered that a histamine pill was more effective than electroshock. They published their research in more than 100 medical papers and were hailed as revolutionaries in the field of mental health. In 1944, while working as a doctor, Arthur also became president of the McAdams Advertising Agency. He focused exclusively on pharmaceuticals, marketing his clients' drugs directly to the doctors who could prescribe them, a tactic that is still in use today. His biggest success was with the tranquilizer Valium, which was launched in 1963. Valium was marketed as a cure for almost all anxiety disorders, irrespective of whether this was true. By 1968, it had become the most prescribed drug in America, and Arthur, having shrewdly negotiated bonuses in proportion to sales, had made a vast fortune. He had also, in 1960, founded a newspaper, the Medical Tribune. Marketed to doctors, the paper was subsidized by Arthur's clients and the articles were favorable to the products they sold. The Medical Tribune shared the same office space with McAdams Advertising, though Arthur made sure that his name was not on the masthead. By this time, Arthur had started buying Asian antiquities, which was to become a lifelong obsession with collecting art. When he saw something that he wanted, he went after it relentlessly, convincing dealers to sell him items that weren't for sale and on occasion telling auction houses to cancel sales as he would purchase every object. His collection would expand to thousands of objects that included American, European, pre-Columbian and Native American art. Radden Keefe makes poignantly clear that behind Arthur's donation of funds to Ivy League universities, was his desire to be accepted by those elite educational institutions that, as a Jew, he had been unable to get into. Art departments and medical schools at universities such as Harvard and Columbia received substantial sums as long as the name Sackler was prominently displayed as the benefactor. In 1967, Arthur and his brothers donated a sum of $3.5 million to house the recently acquired Egyptian Temple of Dendur in a new wing of the Metropolitan Museum of Art that would bear the family name. Arthur had already given $150,000 to the Met in the early 1960s for renovations so that a gallery would be named Sackler, and in 1966 he negotiated an unprecedented, and legally questionable, deal. The director, James Rorimer, agreed to give Arthur a 600-square-foot private enclave within the museum to store his personal collection. Arthur's curator would have access to this enclave, but none of the Met staff would be able to enter it. The deal was made on the understanding that Arthur would donate this collection to the museum, though in the 1980s, unhappy about the way he was treated by the then director, Philip de Montebello, Arthur moved the best pieces to the new Sackler wing at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. Arthur continued to expand the family's portfolio. In 1952, he bought a small pharmaceutical company called Purdue Frederick for Raymond and Mortimer. And in 1966, Purdue Frederick acquired an English company named Knapp Laboratories. Knapp created a groundbreaking pill called MS Contin, which was launched in the UK in 1980. A morphine-based painkiller with a time-release coating, MS Contin freed patients from the need to attend hospital for pain relief via a morphine drip, and was seen as an important advancement in modern medicine. The Sacklers began to manufacture the drug, and in 1984 Purdue started selling it in the US, though without the consent of the FDA. The FDA requires approval for any new product, but, in stark contrast to what its sales force told doctors, Purdue argued that because the drug was only morphine, there was nothing new about it. By the time the FDA caught up, cancer patients had come to rely on it, and Purdue declared that it would be unsafe to pull it from the market. Retroactive approval was given. According to a Purdue employee, the company lawyers put pressure on politicians in the Reagan administration, and MS Contin went on to generate more than $170 million per year in sales for Purdue, far outstripping the Sacklers' wildest expectations. Reveling in this vast fortune, the Sacklers spent lavishly on houses and art while continuing to accrue prestige with their philanthropic endeavors. In 1991, a younger generation of Sacklers founded Purdue Pharma to focus on pain management. They were increasingly worried about the patent on MS Contin expiring, since drug companies are only allowed to hold the patent for a set number of years before other companies can produce generic versions of the product. It would mean a drop in sales, and Purdue needed another blockbuster drug to keep the profits up. Mortimer's daughter Kathy, who was also a doctor, suggested using the opioid oxycodone with the time-releasing Contin coating, and in the early 1990s, Purdue developed OxyContin. Opioids are highly addictive, and doctors are reluctant to prescribe them. Radden Keefe shows how Purdue sought to change this perception by devising a marketing strategy that led doctors to believe that OxyContin was safer than other opioids due to its time-release coating, even though this was not true. Once again, Purdue would need FDA approval. FDA regulators have controlled interaction with the drug companies that they are assigned to in order to guard against corruption, but Purdue's executives held several closed-door meetings with Curtis Wright, the staff member in charge of approving OxyContin. The FDA approved OxyContin in 1995. Shortly after that, Wright resigned from the FDA. A year later, he accepted a job at Purdue with a starting salary of $400,000. Ever the cautious journalist, Radden Keefe does not allege any legal wrong, but it is certainly implied. Purdue had unprecedented control over the packaging of OxyContin. It stated the effects would last 12 hours, though early studies showed that the pain relief did not last that long. As a result, patients took pills more frequently, increasing sales and driving addiction. An army of salespeople was employed to convince doctors that anyone suffering chronic pain, not just cancer patients, would benefit from OxyContin. Many doctors believed that OxyContin was weaker than morphine, though it was actually twice as strong, and Purdue implemented a program where patients could receive free samples of OxyContin to try out. The drug became a colossal success, generating over $30 billion in revenue for Purdue, but opioid addiction in America increased to staggering levels, and, by 2017, more than 200,000 people had died from prescription-based opioid overdoses. Empire of Pain provides several examples of how callous Purdue executives were towards the people who became addicted to its product, including its own staff. The head of the legal department recommended his secretary take OxyContin for her back pain. When she became addicted to it, she was fired. And the book goes into detail about how Purdue executives did everything in their power to prevent stories of addiction from reaching the surface. The Sacklers became adept at negotiating settlements to suppress claims of addiction while ensuring that the Sackler name was not associated with Purdue. When connections were finally made, the Sacklers argued that it wasn't their drug that was the problem, it was the addicts themselves. In the autumn of 2017, 2 articles were published linking the Sacklers to the opioid epidemic, one in the New Yorker by Radden Keefe, which formed the basis of this book. Empire of Pain devotes at least a half a dozen pages to the different reactions of various cultural organizations when the source of the Sacklers' money became known. Several took steps to disassociate themselves with the name. The South London Gallery returned a donation from the family. The actor and former creative director of Shakespeare's Globe, Mark Rylance, urged the theatre not to accept any more money from them. Other organizations that had previously accepted large funds from the Sacklers took a different line. In December 2017, the Victoria and Albert Museum told the New York Times that the Sackler family continues to be an important and valuable donor and we are grateful for their ongoing support. One person who became addicted to OxyContin was the artist Nan Goldin. In 2017, she started an activist group called PAIN, Perspiration Addiction Intervention Now, which was made up of artists, activists, and addicts, to persuade cultural institutions to reject funds from the Sacklers. In February 2019, several dozen members of PAIN entered the Guggenheim Museum, throwing 8,000 of slips of paper into the air with the word prescription on them, and the following month the Guggenheim announced that it would no longer accept gifts from the Sacklers. A week later, both the Tate and National Portrait Gallery in London announced that they would no longer accept donations from the Sacklers. In July 2019, Goldin and her group protested outside the Louvre. 2 weeks later, the Louvre became the first museum to remove the Sackler name from its galleries. At least half a dozen major museums, such as the American Museum of Natural History and the British Museum, still bear the name Sackler on their walls, but some, like the Serpentine Gallery in London, have only quietly removed the name from their marketing material. Other museums, like the Smithsonian, claim they must keep the name due to contractual obligations. Appearing now to care more about preserving their fortune than saving their reputation, the Sacklers funneled money out of the company in case Purdue declared bankruptcy. The company did file for bankruptcy in 2019 after facing a wave of lawsuits from claimants who contended that the false advertising of OxyContin contributed to overdoses and deaths. The Sacklers are currently working to negotiate a settlement whereby they will give up control of Purdue Pharma and pay the claimants $4.2 billion over 10 years, on the condition that they are cleared of wrongdoing and never have to face any civil lawsuits with regard to their role in the opioid epidemic. Radden Keefe portrays most of the Sackler family as greedy and out of touch with the reality of the opioid crisis. When Mortimer's daughter-in-law found out that her son's favorite television show was going to run a damning segment on their family, she complained that it would embarrass her son and that the lives of children are being destroyed. It would have been interesting to hear from members of the family who regret the role they played in fueling opioid addiction, but it proved difficult to find any. OxyContin has also genuinely helped people suffering from serious pain, and the book would have been more balanced if Radden Keefe had spent more time on this. Nonetheless, Empire of Pain is a tour de force of investigative journalism, and Radden Keefe has painted a captivating picture of modern-day drug lords who use their money and influence to separate themselves from the consequences of their actions.